And ding, it's now.
All right, it's all right. We've got stragglers coming in at the last second. Welcome to the Jmap working session, last one of the day today.
Last session this century.
Last
decade.
Last session for Jmap this decade. Certainly not the last one ever. We seem to keep accumulating new work as we go along. I'm sure you are all well aware of the Notewell by now, but if not, search IETF Notewell and you will find it very, very easily, and you can read it at your leisure. This is the agenda that we have so far. One thing that's not mentioned on here is WebSocket. We'll just very briefly touch on that as well. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add or any changes to make to this list? No? Excellent. Let's go straight into calendars then.
Did you say you want to talk about WebSocket?
Yeah, just quickly to say, give a status update on WebSockets.
Sure, I'll get that out of the way. So I'm the document shepherd for WebSocket. I had one set of last call comments that Ken just submitted a revision to cover those. I think on Monday after the internet draft freeze thawed. And so I just need to go through that and revise my Shepherd comments, get those submitted, and we'll be submitting it to IESG hopefully within just a couple of days.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
Good Lord of the Giants.
It's lower than I need, so.
Sure.
Shot us. Yeah.
Do you want to open those slides? Or?
They are open, I believe.
They're a bit off-centered. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have to hit the full screen?
There we go.
That's better.
That button will help.
Yeah. All right. So since Montreal, it's been quite a big update to this spec that really fleshed it out. It was kind of just the rough outlines on the 0.0 version. 0.1 is fairly complete, missing a boatload of examples, which I think are definitely going to be needed because it's very hard to describe really, well, I'm describing everything in prose, but I think it's much easier to understand if you see examples and then you look at the prose rather than just trying to read prose, which is always the case, but I think particularly calendars because it turns out there's a lot of intertwining stuff. So I will add a lot of examples to the document. There aren't any there at the moment, and I'm sure that will help to understand it, but the actual content I think is mainly there. We had a look at it at the interim CalX meeting with CalConnect in Philadelphia about a month ago as well. I think a big, what we really need next is to get some implementation experience. Just it's always going to find edge cases and things. So we hope to at least get some implementation experience at Fastwell over the next 3 to 6 months. If anyone else wants to do that as well, I would love to hear it. There are a few open issues though, or interesting edge cases I thought we'd talk about today. If we can go on to the next slide. Just before that, I thought I'd give a brief description of the data model and the slight changes from last time. Anyone with a really good memory will have seen a slide similar to this at the last IETF, but there are some more things in it now, in particular notification things. So there's this calendar share notification object data type and the calendar event notification data type. Essentially, the calendar event notification data type, to start with that, is just a log of every change that's happened to events in this account. So when you add something, update something, or destroy something, and then you expose a subset of that. Basically, you expose everything where the change was not made by the user that is viewing the account. So this is because calendar systems involve a lot of people editing the same stuff. You get invitations coming in and so on. CalDAV has a concept of an inbox, which covers one small part of this, which is when you receive invitations and updates via IETF. This is kind of just extending that concept to any time someone else makes a change to your calendar. So you have a hope in hell of knowing what's changed, because this we see as a big problem. So yeah, essentially that's kind of a log, and if you store it in the account, doesn't matter how many people this is shared with, you only have to store one copy of it, or you just have to know who has seen which notification and dismissed it. So that's much easier to keep track of, which is why they're co-located with the data rather than with the user who the notification is for necessarily. Calendar share notification, on the other hand, is when a calendar is shared with a different principal. That's stored with the principal data. Principal is a user or a room or any kind of resource that's schedulable in your calendar. That needs to be up there because you may have been removed from a calendar, so you can't store it in that account because you no longer have access to that account. So again, this is a log of when you're added or removed from a calendar, or your permissions change to a calendar, basically. So again, you can be notified and choose whether you actually want to kind of accept the invitation to view this calendar that Bob shared with you, or ignore it, or whatever. That's kind of the general data model, which is basically in line with what CalDAV does, but enhanced in terms of exposing more information in the sharing world to make it possible to create a better experience there. Any particular questions or comments on that? Cool. So I'll move on to that next. Yeah. So there's a few things we've been looking at. I thought, see if people have seen the spec, there's a lot of permissions involved in calendaring. There's the calendar object has gained a lot of different permission options that you can assign to people, more than mailbox. And I do think we need them all. I'm just wondering whether we need to add one more, which is whether can you share a calendar with someone where they have write access, but they don't have permission to add new invitees to events. At the moment, I'm just tying those together, but I think some systems might make that separate. I can't remember whether CalDAV has a separate ACL for that. Does anyone know? Whether you can add participants to an event. So I have write access to it, but I can't invite new people to it.
I have never seen anything in CalDAV for that.
Okay, so probably rather not add yet another ACL. As I said, there's a lot of them already, but I don't know if anyone thinks we need that. Next thing is when a calendar is shared with someone, they need the ability to change the name to make it more understandable to them. Otherwise, you might have a load of calendars all called work because everyone shares their work calendar with you, but you want to rename work to Barry's work or to Alexi's work. And that's just your view of that calendar is renamed. You don't want it renamed everywhere else. So there's kind of two options here. One is that you make the name property writable for these sharees, but once they've written it, it's their local copy and they don't have access. And that doesn't affect anyone else, which is fine, but also they don't see the original then. Or we could have a separate property that they can write so that they still have access to the original name, if that makes sense. So that you have two properties on the object, one which is the immutable original name, which only the owner can change, and one which is their local name. So I don't know if anyone has experience with systems like this before. Is it better to have that explicitly a separate property, or as just you can update the core property, but then you overwrite whatever was there before and you don't really have access to that? Not a lot of people. It's always, yeah.
Yeah, this is Barry. I have experience with that sort of thing in other contexts where I think it matters more.
Yeah.
I can't imagine why it makes a difference here.
I guess the thing is you change the name of it, and then you no longer have access to the old name in the data model anymore.
Right.
And then someone says, hey, there's this calendar and you're trying to find it and the UI can't expose the old name. I don't know. Is that?
Yeah, and I suppose if you call the calendar by some funny name that someone else will refer to, then maybe. But I mean, 99% of the usage of this is going to be you share your calendar with me, and I guess you say you call it work and I call it Neil's work.
You no longer care what the original name is.
I don't care what
is
the
that-
original name is, and I will never care what the original name is, which is not the case with some other things in other contexts, but here.
Well, so we could, the current spec just has it, doesn't have a separate property, it just, it does overwrite it and you never have the original name after that. We could leave that. I just, was wondering whether, this is the kind of thing I can imagine someone's had experience with and either it's fine or they've gone at some point down the road, oh, this is a gotcha because you need the original name at this point because of something.
The other gotcha is in contexts where the object can be updated by the owner or somebody else, and that would overwrite your change, and you'd have to change it again.
It explicitly says in the spec, yes, that does not change the
Right.
Chevys. Once they've changed it, it's theirs. And they have a their own
And
copy.
so that doesn't bother me with that. But that's the sort of thing that happens, for instance, in calendar invitations and stuff like that. Where it can be a problem.
You definitely don't want that to happen. I agree. There's an even weaker argument for the same thing with color. I think, again, once you've set your color, who cares what the original color is? That's definitely not important.
Except gentle. Although I think that actually there will be a use for original name.
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm imagining things like IETF calendar. You share that with me. It's still going to be called that. Our family holiday calendar. We'll keep that name. But I mean, yeah.
Well, sure, but the issue here is that if it's IETF calendar and you share it with me and I decided to call it something else,
Right, yeah.
why would I ever need to go and know that you called it IETF calendar? That's the question. So.
Okay.
Question from Rob Norris, who's
Yes.
not even on any of the official things, but anyway, if you delete your custom name, does it revert to the original?
There's no way to delete
Yeah.
a name. You can update a property, but
Can't
can't
set it to
can't
null.
delete it. So no, you can't get the original back basically if you don't have a separate property.
And comment on Jabber from Ken Murchison says, I agree with Barry.
Fine. Okay. I will not add a separate property. Then. It sounds
I
easy.
would also add to this, we could always add an extension later that exposes it.
If you want to expose the original name as opposed to local name, yeah. But okay, sounds not important. Mind a bit of bike shedding, I guess. That's one. There's a Sherry's access property on a calendar, which is, does this act in team mode where everybody is acting as themselves in a shared calendar? So if Barry adds an event, Barry's the organizer, and if Alexi, then Alexi's the organizer, or are you acting as whoever owns that calendar? Like Barry's acting as Alexi's secretary and owns that. At the moment, I'm giving that there's a property that says who you're acting as on the calendar, which is either owner or self, as in the owner of the calendar. But the word owner is used in a variety of contexts in calendaring, and I'm wondering whether it's better just to rename that, even though it's in a different place here, just to avoid confusion. But yeah.
So it's the question here is just what we call it.
Yeah, basically, which I think probably I'll rename it to avoid confusion. Anyway, okay. So calendar events. There's a couple of extra properties that I'm wondering whether we add, which are not in CalDAV or that kind of thing, but do seem to be quite common. I think both Exchange and Google Calendar have very similar stuff, which you can probably guess from the names what they do. One where when you send out ITIP messages, you don't send out all the participants with them, just yourself. Should we actually try to standardize this thing, given that, as I said, seems to be common various proprietary systems? And then the similar one is some indication of whether the organizer is prepared for other people to turn up. You can't stop people actually forwarding, obviously, information, but you can give an indication of whether that's likely to be approved of or not, and then clients might actually do something in the UI at least to show that. So
I've got a
Any thoughts on that?
question.
Yes.
Is this something that should be in JS Calendar, or is it something that's in Jmap?
Well, yeah, so this is a curious thing. Like, these would be extra properties that we'd register against JS Calendar, but that's fine. There's a whole registry with that. They don't need to be in the initial spec. And the point of them is they only really affect stuff when you're using it via a protocol. When you're using it, in fact, they only really affect it within this Jmap calendars, because it's about when I send out invitations, should I include this information or not? It's not an inherent property necessarily of the event. So I don't know. You could argue either way, but I thought it didn't need to be in the JS Calendar original thing, given how easy it is to register new properties, and it makes more sense to register it with the definition of how it's going to be used in Jmap calendars.
And it's nice to start using that registry soon so that we show it's
Not ossified.
extensible.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so I will look at adding those. Okay, so this is, so one of the capabilities is how big an event object is the server willing to store, which sounds sensible and is probably something we want, and there's a very similar capability in CalDAV. The trouble is it's a bit harder in Jmap to say what actually is the size, and how can we make this useful to the client? Because you've got this kind of JSON object. Is it like the stringified JSON encoding in bytes, or and then it depends how the JSON's formatted maybe slightly, or what Yeah, exactly. And it might depend on if the server adds in extra properties or something when it saves it, which you don't have in the client, because there are a few cases where the server might, in the really extreme case, the server might bump the sequence number from 999 to 1000. You've added an extra character and suddenly you've gone over the over the size limit. It seems like a sensible capability, except I can't work out how on earth to expose it in a way to make it actually useful, because unless the client knows how to calculate the size as the server is going to see it, what's the point of telling it how big a thing it can accept? So I wondered if anyone had ideas about that, or do we just ditch the capability on the chance that, probably, unless you're doing something stupid, you're not going to have something too big, and so you don't really need a capability about it.
Alexi, I think you just made a good argument for how unworkable this is. So
maybe
probably
just
drop it. What was the reason why it was there in the first place? Just
I
because
think the danger is if people start, a calendar event, it kind of can contain arbitrary key values, and some of those properties can be, can be as big as you like. You can embed a data URL in there with 3 megs of attachment data. Now, it's not the way you meant to do it. You meant to upload you should upload a blob like you normally do in Jmap and reference that. But you could embed data URLs, and so you could have like an arbitrary big object. Obviously, at some point, the server is going to say, "No, this is silly. Stop it."
Is it more useful to limit URL size?
Maybe. You could still construct a ridiculously arbitrary big object just without that, but it would be harder.
Yeah, you can just have, property 1, property 2, property 3, but
you could add 1 billion participants, although there is actually a separate capability on the maximum number of participants you can have, I think. But yeah, so I don't know. There obviously has to be some size limit in the server. It's just how, even if it should be exposed. Maybe we just don't need to. It's a kind of sanity limit, and if you hit it, you'll get an error, but you don't need to know it, because you should never hit it if you're not doing something silly. Maybe that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm kind of comparing it in my head to the quota stuff that we were talking about before in Extra, where it says the fact that quota says you've only got this many bytes left isn't a reason to reject uploading any particular message from the client. The client should not say you can't upload, or I think it was even must not stop uploading even though it can warn, because the server may store it and compressed in such a way that it still fits. And likewise, the server may reject a message which is smaller than what quota it said it would accept, or what max size it said it would accept at any point. So it's just an indication. Clients can look at this and say, your 10 meg message is clearly not going to be accepted on this thing that says maximum size of a calendar event is 50 kilobytes.
Is it worth having it all then?
Yeah, probably not. The server can always reject anyway.
as long as there is a special error,
Yes.
I think then you can at least.
I'm pretty sure it's a too large error or an oversize. Yeah. Which is separate to over quota, which is another thing you can have, but they're both errors that exist. All right. I think we'll just ditch it then. From the sound of it, if it's not useful, and I don't think we can make it useful. Fine. Cool. I just wanted to talk briefly about alert push, which, so this is obviously calendar events can have alerts or alarms, whatever you want to call them, like 10 minutes before show an alert. We've added a way that Jmap servers can push to clients when an alert's triggered, so that they don't necessarily have to calculate all of that themselves. What's slightly weird is the way you register for this is with a pseudo type, which is not entirely unprecedented. You register, so normally you can register for types that you care about. When those types change, you get pushed the new state string. we have some pseudo type thing in Mail where you can register for a type just to be pushed when changes to when new messages arrive rather than any change. So this is kind of similar to that, except that the push type you get back is not a state change type. It's a completely different push type, which has information about the alert in. I think it's still okay, but I don't know if people found it particularly weird. I probably no one here has had a look in enough detail at the event, the push stuff in Jmap to really say, but if you do have any comments, no. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll leave it as it is. If people flag it later in review, we can look at options, but so I mentioned it's a bit weird, but seemed to be the right thing. Okay, finally then I just wanted to talk about the other things I haven't put in yet, but some of them I will probably. Delegation is in iCalendar. It's also in JS Calendar. It's not widely used, but is used in some places. It's kind of a formal method of saying I'm not coming to this meeting, but someone else is, and I've invited them. It doesn't require much on the server for server support, but there's a little bit, so I thought I should probably document that. Similarly, party crashing, it's just should the server allow you to RSV to an event where you've not been invited to, and you just add you as a participant. Again, this is kind of defined in the it's defined in IETF, but whether the servers will accept your RSV, of course, you don't know. Although with the new property of allows forwarding, that would actually tell you because it says, do I allow other people to come? And also taking over an event, which is where the organizer needs to change. Normally, this again is in IETF, it says you can agree out of band that someone else has organized this event now, and then they take over as the organizer. Calendar have never really offered a way to do this, but this turns out to be something that you actually do need to do from time to time. So again, I thought it would be worth putting in just how you should do this over the protocol. The last one I don't plan to add, because as far as I can tell, no one uses it anymore, which is countering via ITIP. Again, this was never added to CalDAV. I don't think there's any clients that offer a way of doing it. And it looks like once you're starting to negotiate over what time a meeting should be, you want something much more like Doodle, which is coming with the vPoll stuff, which is happening in CalExt at the moment. And so I think that's going to be a much better solution to this in the standards world. So unless anyone really, really wants it, I wasn't planning to add the counter proposal support. So that's just a brief view of the bits left, but I don't think any of those are super important. As I said, I think the big thing now is to implement the core bits, which are all specified, and get some experience with that, and then add some examples and things and the details like that into the document, and hopefully, yeah, maybe middle of next year we'll be kind of finished. That's kind of the rough timeline. There are unfortunately not so many calendaring people in this group all the time, but yeah, we're also looking at this with CalConnect and yes, other calendar people.
CalConnect is next meeting in April 20th to 24th in Nottingham in the UK. So we'll set up a interim meeting again for the CalEx group there and potentially discuss some of this there
and
as
we'll
well.
probably discuss this there as well because it makes sense. Yes, hopefully people from Google Calendar and Apple, etc. are there again. We can talk about that there. Okay, I think that's all I have on calendaring. If anyone else wants to ask any questions about it, do so. Otherwise, let's move on.
I have a question, but
Yeah.
I'm too lazy to get up, so I'll
Okay.
ask from here. As a participant, you mentioned at the very beginning you were looking for implementations. Are you looking for server implementations or client implementations or both? And in either case, what are the things that are available to interoperate with?
So in my mind, I was thinking more server implementation, although client implementation obviously is useful too. And I think the main thing is that this is somewhere where ideally anyone that's implementing it would come to CalConnect, where we do try to do interoperability testing as well as discussion stuff, but we can also arrange other times to do interoperability testing at IETF or whatever, or also hackathon, or just feedback on experience when implementing it. If there's bits that are unclear, contradictions, things you can't implement for whatever reason, it's calendaring stuff gets surprisingly complicated once you have all the different things going on. And so, I think we need just a bit of experience just to make sure that we've got the details right. So I said, we'll be working on some implementation. Hopefully we can find some other people as well. And next few months we'll get some experience with that.
Just out of curiosity, are there any implementations of this stuff other than in Fastmail?
Of the Jmap calendars, I'm not sure of the calendars yet. There is a Jmap mail, but not I'm not aware of Jmap calendar implementations. This is all much newer, and we will talk to some people and see if we can persuade them.
To be fair, Fastmail's not implementing most of the stuff.
We haven't implemented most of this yet. So this is zero implementations, which is exactly why I said I think we need some implementation experience before we can say for sure, this is right.
All right, thank you. All right. Next on our agenda was MDN. Unfortunately, Raphael has not joined us. This is what the last meeting said. No, I don't have any slides from anyone. I had people who said they would attend the meeting, but the only one who's here is Ken. So.
What's the time here?
Well, and Rolf's just arrived.
Morning in London, so if
Yeah.
it's Europe, if that's actually not valid.
No, we have various Europeans involved in a lot of this, but well, this will be a lot quicker meeting than I expected if we don't have people to talk about these ones.
We just have a feeling how ready it is.
I think MDN is pretty much ready. The discussion last time was everyone was happy with the changes. We discussed whether MDN was too short, but everyone knows what MDN means. It's unlikely that something else will grab that name, so we're happy with that. I think we're ready to go to last call. I will query the authors on the mailing list and check, but I think everyone was happy with the most recent draft. It is version 2 now. Neil, do you remember anything else on that?
No.
No. This is published July 19th, so co-located with the last IETF.
So no, I haven't did since last time.
Yeah, MDN set, MDN parse. It all looks good. All right, I will follow up and hopefully do a last call on it in the next couple of weeks. So. All right, let's move on then. Next thing is the quota draft. There's been a lot of discussion on it and not much. I think there's still a lot of work to do there. We need to make sure it aligns with the IMAP quotas and discuss what should be included in there. So we need to restart the discussion on that.
The authors aren't online.
No.
A shame. Has anyone else read the quotas draft? Can you read it?
If you have comments, let's talk.
Yeah, I think this is Neil. One of as I recall from the list, the biggest question, there was this separate, you could specify the scope of the usage separate to the scope of the total, which I didn't really understand. And I was hoping the authors could try and, it did, yes. Like, you have 1,000 gigabytes of quota, and that quota is scoped to the server. And your usage is 10 gigabytes, which is scoped to the user. Well, that's not very helpful, because if they're not in the same scope, then it doesn't tell you how close you are to a limit or anything. And I didn't quite understand their explanation of why they thought this was useful. So they're not here. So I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts on why you might want something like that.
It also only had ability to get quota. There was no quota management through it. It was purely for display.
I think that's fine. I don't think you want to manage.
That might be okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, if people want to do both, I don't mind, but I think just having one side is fine.
Generally, it's going to be very different. Setting quota is admins kind of managing a system that's not.
Cool. And quota / changes, yeah. Yeah, okay, so that's the next step will be to keep discussing on the list. Yes. Without the authors being available, it's a little tricky to follow up and check. They did tell me they would be attending remotely, so. I'll see what happened there. All right, and we'll try and get this done early next year, hopefully. It doesn't look like it's going to be particularly difficult to get done, but I know there's a few different people interested in making sure that it covers everything they want to cover, and certainly having the same types as the IMAP quota in terms of storage.
I assume they should share a registry if they can. Because they're in Europe.
Yeah.
It's like 9 a.m. in Europe.
Yeah.
10 a.m.
Yeah.
No.
All right. Next time I will make sure to check in with people again rather than trusting that I'll be here from a month ago. Cool. S-MIME, we have no work on. Alexi did tell me in advance he wouldn't be able to work on it at the moment. So the main question with S-MIME is, when do we expect to get back to it?
I should be able to do something by Vancouver. I think that there are also, we had a lovely discussion last time, and I think there would be 2 documents.
Yeah.
One is extension of the current one, which is a simpler. I want to verify this as my signature on this message. And the more complicated one, if you want to use service key and certificate storage, then you can both do both signing and encryption and decryption.
Cool. All right. So do we want to set a milestone for the simple one soon, and then set another milestone for adopting a more complex one?
I like your thinking.
All right. I'll put the milestone for the first one early next year, and for adopting the second one at the same time, and then we can work on the second one afterwards.
Yeah.
Cool. Easy. Next is JS Contact. Unfortunately, we don't have Robert or Mario here, so Neil, you're back up again.
You are just wildcard first.
Okay, so this has been punted into the Jmap working group, which kind of makes sense. The concept is as JS Calendar is to iCalendar, JS Contact is to vCard. It's much easier to use, more consistent JSON-based format for representing contacts, i.e. people and their locations. Contacts in some ways are simple because you don't have things like recurrences and time zones and all the stuff that make calendars hard, but they also involve real people and the real world, which makes them hard, in particular internationalization. We talked a bit about this at CalConnect a few months ago as well. So your big issue is things like addresses and names, which can be complicated in ways I still can't imagine fully, even though I know about some of the weird edge cases. So that makes them interesting if you want a format that's suitable for worldwide use. I think we came up with quite a neat solution for this, though. So the trouble is you have this tension of not wanting to make the kind of data format ridiculously complicated when you want to do just something simple. That's always been a key requirement, at least to me, for this format and for the equivalent calendar one. Simple things should be simple, but you also want to be able to make the other things possible. And it just needs flexibility. So I think what we come up with is kind of concept of tagged words. So if you had a name like Mr. Joe Blogs, rather than having separate title field, Mr. first name field, Joe, last name field, blogs, that's great for the Western world, but there's lots and lots of other ways you could describe names, and people have alternate names and all sorts of things. So instead, what I think we're heading towards is a kind of, in some ways, simpler property called name, which would be an array of objects. And the object would be like, the first one would have a value Mr., second one value name, Joe, and last one value blogs. And then you could add other attributes onto that object. So you could tag it as, this is a first name, this is a title, this is a prefix. And we can make that as rich as you like, and you only have to include the tags you want. So that both gives you the ability to describe things pretty much in as much detail as you need. And also for simple clients, you don't have to understand any of those tags. You just join all the words together and you have the name to display to the user in, in a reasonable way. This seemed quite a neat solution to me, and we could do something very similar with addresses, which suffer from exactly the same problem. So if people have any thoughts on that.
Is that in the draft right now?
I don't think it is. I don't
That's
think
okay.
that we've got.
So I'd have to see the text, and I'd have to see some examples with different kinds of names. Maybe Spanish names versus Burmese names versus whatever.
Yeah, I think we'd.
Right.
Yeah.
Alexei says things with patronymics and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, yeah.
But I think the nice thing is this can express all that, and
Yes.
it lets you ignore it when you don't need it, and
Right.
but it's still there when you do.
Much of the time you just want a string.
Yes, and so if you want to get that, it's just map.value
Right.
join.
But
Yeah.
then there's the thing of what do you call the person and how do you sort the person's name and all of that, which is very dependent on the name format in the localization that you're talking about.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So I'd have to see the text and the examples to.
Yes.
I will review it when it's there.
I think we need a lot more examples for sure, and trying to work out how you represent them. But yeah.
Yeah, Alexei,
Yeah.
my initial reaction doesn't look too horrible.
Mhm.
I was just thinking what LDAP has. I think LDAP has first name, last name, and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but it's as an example of what's already in use, right?
Well, but a lot
And-
of stuff
and
already in
this-
use has things like, yes, title, first name, last name, suffix, and it's like, cool, that covers everything you can do in the world. Well,
Right,
no.
and I agree that what you propose is better than that. So, but again, I think I would like to see some examples
Yeah,
so that we can
sure.
argue about.
And best to go seek out people from different countries to help you with the examples.
Yes, we definitely need that.
For instance, Spanish names have various family names in there, and there's this side of the family and that side of the family, and the name that you use as the surname for the person is somewhere in the middle there, and
Yes.
getting that
so-
represented correctly is a challenge.
Yes. But I think, yeah, that's the kind of nice thing about that is you could, you just need to get the tags right. Now, I admit, I don't know yet what all those tags should be, but I think as a model concept, this seems the cleanest one that I've seen that might work.
Conceptually, would you have a registry of tags or just have them be ad hoc?
Well, and they need to be either, I think probably going to need to be a registry. You need an initial set of ones you expect people to use in the specification, but
I think
maybe you could
you
define it
may
all there.
find that you need a registry of significant ones, and then you can use any others for whatever.
Yes, you could certainly add ones that you just
You'll
For your
use
own
one
purposes,
this is the
like-
one you sort on. This is the one you call the person by, whatever.
Mm.
And
Like, certainly,
this is
yeah.
an honorific.
You probably even want, if I'm sorting by last name as a concept, this is the name you should use.
Right.
If I'm sorting by
That's the kind of thing I mean.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
then for others, it may just be, patronymic might just be one that you can use and you don't have to have it registered anywhere because it doesn't have any meaning to automated processes.
Mm. Although it would be nice if, I don't know, if everyone that was using that used the same tag for it, just, that's helps. So having the registry probably doesn't hurt.
I guess one thing that I'm seeing in this is potentially if you had things that were just a sort key, you might not want them to also be part of the dumb display. So there might need to be a dot silent or something.
Yeah, I mean the other one is multiple names, of course. Like this is my name if I'm in a Western world, but this is my name if I'm in China.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
They probably don't all want to be in one long string. That's not how you would.
Oh, no, absolutely. And for instance, yeah.
That's a harder problem, I think,
In
actually. Like,
countries like in Hungary, it's customary to put the family name first, just like in China.
but that's okay.
Right.
That's all still part of your name, right?
Right. But
I mean, it may be just where you want name
Yeah,
and
well,
display name or something. Or I don't know.
yeah, not quite that, but even name and display name aren't that simple because the way you display a name will depend on the social context that you're displaying it.
Yeah.
Displaying it for IETF will be different from displaying it for a visit to the White House and something like that.
Even things like nickname and stage name and author's pen name.
Pronouns.
So this is Pete Resnick. In the Apple address book, they do the name. They have a concept of nickname. They have a concept of phonetic name, right? So quite often when I fill in these things, I've got Han characters in the actual name. I've got pinyin in the phonetic name, and I've got the English name that the person uses in the nickname. Now, rarely do clients that use that address book get it all right. Most of them just display the real name, although they generally put the order right. They do family name first if it's a Han name, but
they don't get it right for Hungarian.
well, I don't know if they do or not. Apple's pretty cute about doing things in interesting ways. So I don't think you should get into the sub-semantics of it. I think you should stay at name and give phonetic name possibly or some other Romanized name, Latinized name, whatever you want to call it. Try not to get too deep into the weeds of what's
Yes.
because there's too many semantics to deal with.
Yeah, I don't want to end up with an array of arrays. Like you've got an array of names, and each of those is an array of parts like that. That I think is when we get too far. So
I think we should not. I think we should stop rat holing on this now
Yeah.
and wait until we have text and examples to look at, and then we can review it.
yeah, I think just to sum up, then I'm
The
leaning.
concept is good.
Yes, leaning towards kind of maybe, as Pete said, properties like name, phonetic name, and nickname that probably cover most of the cases. But at least for the name one, it's an array of tagged objects. Whereas the other two maybe just be strings. Phonetic name is just whatever, a nickname. It's just a string.
I think we will enjoy nitpicking and finding hole in it once you publish it.
I'm sure. Well, I'm not even an author on this in theory, but yes, contacts are weird
That's
because
what we do, right?
yeah, it should be simple. It's just like storing a bunch of data. There's no complex data model, but yeah, the internationalization stuff make it.
This is the kind of bike shed that everyone has an opinion on. As Jim just pointed out, pronouns is probably something.
Well, it's not even just it's a bite. It is that you're trying to make something that will work for everyone when we only experience a very small subset of the needs.
Do you have a similar thing for addresses?
Yes, absolutely. I mentioned that briefly. I think exactly the same concept, addresses, is the way to go for that because, again, there's so many different ways it
and we
might be
make so
expressed.
many assumptions that are wrong.
Yes.
In
So
various places.
yes, and as I said, you want at least for simple things. I just want the address to print. Great, just map dot value join. They've told you how it should be presented. you get the value and you write it down. But if you do, yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the concept. I think this works at least better than the other things we've seen so far, and better than vcard and other garbage does. So hopefully we'll have some kind of draft by next time. The good news is this is the hard bit of Jmap contacts, the data format. Once we have that defined, I think that's going to be a much easier spec than like Jmap calendars or Jmap mail to put together, and then we have like the full suite of contacts, mail, calendar, which will be very nice over a consistent protocol. So we'll see when this gets finished, but yeah, maybe by the end of next year if we're lucky. I read the slide. What's on here?
That's what was changed in the previous two
Okay.
revisions.
So
6.5 is what's out there now.
I'll have to have a look at the draft then. Maybe localized string was what we're talking about. I can't remember whether that was before or after this discussion. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So this has been discussed in CalConnect as well. For all that CalConnect is called CalConnect, it does do contact related stuff. And particularly there's a group who are involved in ISO as well. And ISO is doing a bunch of work in addressing and naming at the moment.
Also good is
so
they are non-Western,
Yeah.
which means we have broader experience of names and things like that.
Cool.
So I guess this needs to be officially adopted in the Jmap working group if we're doing JS
Yeah,
contact
that
here.
is a point that
Yeah.
has not yet been officially adopted, has it?
Do we need to change the charter again as well?
That is underway.
Charter is in progress.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
I would wait for it to officially go through beginning of December,
Yep.
just in case. I don't expect problems, but
Cool. That's all right. This is almost the next question on our list is to do with the charter. I didn't stick on this slide, but push. Apparently, our AD who loves creating work for this group in particular, I'm up to now 8, 9. We were talking about whether the correct working group for a more general push for application protocols belongs here or belongs somewhere else. Do you have updated thinking on this, Alexi?
Well, Jmap looks better than Extra for this work, but maybe, do you have a draft?
I don't know. But this was not our work again. This was, I think it's from Dovecut people. But the main thing to me, I think we can extract out kind of Jmap's already following this kind of the best practices for setting up your push channel to ensure that you verify that you're not spamming some random person, that, you know, all the stuff that security concerns, etc. All that, and then because what the actual data you push is going to be different depending on whether it's IMAP or Jmap or what you're doing and stuff. So but if we can kind of say this is how you set it up in a way that we pretty much reuse everywhere, that will be easier for server implementers and well, easier for everyone. I think that's the main goal as far as that plus then actually having maybe a one for IMAP that uses that. So maybe it's even just a best common practices document for the kind of abstract, this is how you set up a push channel thing.
Okay.
I don't know. Does that make, I said it's not really our work, but that's the way I look at it.
Tentatively Jmap, but let's have a look at the draft collectively.
Yeah, there are 2 drafts that are both in a similar area, which is why I thought to bring the question of should all this happen in one place. One of them came from CalConnect, from Martin, and that has already been published as an IETF personal draft a couple of years ago and expired since. He'd like to bring that back up again. And the other one is quite recently from Dovecut for IMAP as part of their chat over IMAP stuff. They wanted to add push there. Martin also has something on auto discovery, which is another great area of which
auto discovery is if anyone implemented any of the things
about it.
Yeah.
For Thursday night. The number of different auto discovery mechanisms that we've come up with over the years.
We implement almost all of them and almost nobody uses them. It's so annoying.
I think we had more than one BOF on this.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like sort of people sympathetic at least to that, but just
Yeah.
I blamed Cyrus the Bull last time. He just disappeared and nothing
Yeah.
got done.
He's deep inside the apple.
Right. Okay.
All right.
We need a meta discovery protocol for.
We do need a meta discovery protocol for auto discovery protocols. That's right.
No one implemented it. The problem is not needing the protocol. It's just, I don't know why no one implements them.
Because they're not perfect. All right. So next thing on the list is milestone review. Those are the 3 milestones that we currently have listed. Submit document with guidance for implementation of IMAP servers and proxies, which we promised to do, Neil, and we have not done. Yes, we did. You signed off on the initial charter, and we said we're going to do it in the initial charter. We're going to make Rob Mueller write it. Yeah. So I should get on that. I'd like to kick that one another 6 months down the road, but leave it on our things. So I'll say July 2020.
I once suggested to the core working group something that they did of changing a milestone to be something like 2099, just to park it. So, because they didn't want to get to it anytime soon and they didn't know when. So if you have something like that, maybe that's the thing to do.
Don't do it.
No, Alexei doesn't like that idea. Well,
It's sort of like we might come back to it maybe.
Stuff like
at
that
some-
in our bug tracker.
change the milestone again. Right. It's a question of whether you prefer having a milestone that is known to be totally unrealistic but near term, and you know that they're going to keep changing it and changing it and changing it, or whether you just want to admit that this is work you're going to park for a while, but you will get back to it eventually, and then you'll change the milestone to something reasonable. My preference is the latter, but you're the responsible AD for this, so I don't.
Well, I think considering all the other work we've done, it's either do it quickly or we just say we're not going to do it.
I would like to keep it on our radar.
I would slightly prefer to keep it on the radar, but I'm less unhappy about dropping it if it's what happens.
I'll put it
Than
for
I used to
December
be.
2020 and review at the end of next year. If we have not yet got there, then it's
Ask some of the people working for you to do it
that's the plan.
by Vancouver.
But he keeps having other priorities. All right. No, it's all right. We will. Next year's plan includes cleaning things up, and this is part of that. All right. Submit message disposition notification, September 2019. That one I will bump to December because I think the only reason it didn't get submitted was that I didn't follow up with the authors and say, let's go. Jmap over WebSockets likewise is going November.
And I think we want a new one for quota, right?
Yes. So we have a few new ones to add.
I just looked at the quota draft. It's relatively small, and I agree with Neil.
Yep. So
It needs to be made slightly more generic, and certain things are overcomplicated. Just remove. It will be both slightly simpler, slightly more complex at the same time, but more general. Yes.
but realistically, we should be able to get to that early next year.
I mean, it's very small. It's just,
Say,
it's not like.
It should be straightforward.
all right, I'm going to say Feb 2020. SMIME, I've already said I was going to say Feb 2020 for the simple one, and likewise for adopting an additional document for the more complex SMIME.
Fine.
Cool. MDN's covered. Jmap calendars, we've said we'll push that out to July next year. And then decide what to do with that. And JS contact, realistically, well, we've got to adopt it first. So we won't set a milestone for it at this meeting.
Why not?
Well, because we don't our charter doesn't allow us to.
Well, conditional on charter being approved, I think you can make it
Yeah.
late December, January.
Yeah, I would put adopt for January next year.
If you put the milestone in now, then when the rechartering comes along, the IASG will see the milestone. So
Yep.
why not?
All right, so I'll put an adopt for JS Contact for January next year, and then have a testing by the end of the year, probably have something ready for testing at least, if not published. Cool. All right. What should we do about push? Because that will be a recharter if we add it.
So do you say there is a document already?
There are two documents that are both separate. It's not an overall document that describes the general problem space and a consistent way to do it. But that's what I would like to see people moving towards.
See, if depending how general it is, HTTP-based working group might or might not want to have a look at it.
Okay.
So it would be helpful to see the document before deciding.
There's also RSC 8599, which I wasn't aware of until Monday. So
Right.
it describes some of this stuff for SIP, and it may be that between that and what's in Jmap, we can create a more general document. So
Can you send me a message with point to the DAF code document and expired?
yep. Cool. And with that, we are at other business. Is there anything else? No, we have plenty of work to get on with. I'd love to certainly see some more interrupt with the Jmap calendars, but I expect that will mostly be happening through CalConnect. And other than that, the quota work's probably the immediate thing that we should be discussing on the list and getting that nailed down. MDN will mostly be contacting the authors and saying, do you think you're ready to go? Maybe we should implement it as well. Test it. All right. Anything else?
I think I could.
No one said anything in Jabber?
No.
No. All right. Cool. Thanks, everybody. We've finished half an hour early. Go get yourself pretty for dinner. Thanks, remote people. Probably by mistake. Cool. Thank you for the loan of the pen.